Chapter 11, Winds of Change. After the experience of my older brothers at the Christian Brothers, my father and mother decided that their last son was in need of something better. An education closer to home and nearer to the aspirations that they themselves held dear. So in 1963 I was enrolled at St. Paul's College Bellambi, a Marist Fathers school. The Marist Fathers were known for their academic rigor and had many doctors and lawyers in their ranks. They were also known for their missionary work. The differences between the schools I cannot really attest to. But the one my brothers agreed on was discipline. Corporal punishment at St. Paul's was looked upon as a last resort. As my brother John, so often the target of the Christian Brothers, said, "You won't have those sadistic mongrel hypocrites to put up with." So here I was, going off to high school, something my parents would have wondered if they were ever going to see. And a brand new school at that. No straps, no heavy-handed discipline or high-handed attitudes. It must have seemed that for once, all the ducks were lining up. And it was all just a short walk away. Certate bonum certamen. St. Paul's was just 2 years into its history and 20 minutes away. Father Gilmartin, the principal, was a clear-thinking man who saw the school as one that developed the individual as well as the mind. Paramount to his way of thinking was that each student carried a personal responsibility to conduct themselves in school uniform as ambassadors for the school. The school's motto was Certate bonum certamen. Translated as stand up and fight the good fight. Father Gilmartin was himself a former barrister. A tall man with an air of authority. He was also a teaching principal, teaching both religion and geography. He was lively and personable as a teacher. But strict. His view was, as we were the pioneering students of the college, the community's acceptance and support would be founded on the performance and behavior of the students. The teaching staff mirrored Father Gilmartin's ideals and approach. They were strict, but still very approachable. They made the classroom a good place to be, and our appetites for learning grew as a consequence. An example of their approach was my form master, Father Cameron. One Friday he asked, "Would your mum and dad mind a visit from me on Saturday?" I was chuffed. Of course I said yes. I burst in the door with the news. They were both excited and Mum decided to go all out, even baked a cake. When he arrived it was almost like an old friend had dropped by. Father Cameron also came from a very large family. He had grown up on a dairy farm on the north coast. Not unlike Uncle Holly's farm. The rapport was instant. You see, it was all part of the policy of the school, to get to know the family of each new student. He was only able to stay a short time as he had to relieve one of the parish priests. This was another plus for the Marist Fathers. They would relieve the local priests on the weekends to give them some free time. Setting a good example then was the school's stock in trade. The staff set the tone and the students followed. Each of us was expected to achieve a minimum of 50% in our fortnightly class tests. And it was mandatory that each student was to score a full 10 out of 10 for behavior. Any infraction scored -1. It was considered a disgrace if you scored below 10. If you scored above 75% in your class marks, your name was entered on the school's board of distinction. The students who excelled both academically and in behavior throughout the year received a merit award at the annual end-of-year school presentation. My time at St. Paul's was just the best. My happiest years. I studied science and maths, religion and geography, social studies, English and commerce. Although sport would only ever be house sports. But even that was a welcome release after I got the all clear from Dr. Nix in 1964. No more sitting on the sidelines. Father Harding. What the school was about was developing a student to their full potential academically and as future citizens. The headmaster and the staff themselves exemplified both. A case in point was my science teacher, Father Harding. Father Harding was already a standout in the eyes of many of the students. Apart from having a degree in tropical medicine, he had a keen sense of humor and fun. He just had a way of transferring his enthusiasm for knowledge to his students. Science, even mathematics. Whether in the classroom or on excursion. Learning to him was more than just acquiring knowledge. It was enjoying the acquisition. The thing about Father Harding we all agreed on was that he was a real knockabout guy. Raised on a dairy farm in Gerringong, he loved rugby league. His school science excursions were as anticipated as they were memorable. These included trips to Sydney, to view the Science Museum, a visit to Taronga Zoo, and climbing small coastal beachside cliff faces to study the various local rock formations. And that fitted perfectly with the ethos of St. Paul's College. The school, so new, was determined to establish itself as a centre of secondary learning. Years later at a school reunion he was back on leave from a missionary hospital in the Solomon Islands. I reconnected with him as an adult. While speaking to him we recalled a minor episode when I was sent to him to be disciplined. He had given me just the one cut of the cane, then I think 50 lines. We both had a chuckle about it. He looked at me then and said, "Phil, didn't you have a heart condition or you'd had surgery not long before?" I was pleased that he remembered. You know, Phil, I hated that job, it ran against the grain. I despise corporal punishment. His memory as a teacher and true man of God is indelible. Transit Lounge 77 Rothay Road. Time to bring you up to speed with the comings and goings in the Ryan household. Looking back, number 77 was more akin to an airport or transport hub. It would have been no surprise to me back then, if Dad had placed signs above the front and back doors. Arrivals, departures. So working our way down the batting order. Joy, being the eldest, my lovely sister was by the time I was at St. Paul's married with 2 children. Home for her was Gwynville. Bill, was back in Australia, married and teaching in the southwest of the state at Booligal. He and Trish had 2 young daughters. Kevin, was only just married and working as a fitter and turner at John Lycett's Port Kembla. He and wife Faye had twin daughters. Home for them was Queen's Parade, Wollongong. Peter, back in Wollongong after a successful stint as a jockey. He bought a milk run, which would provide me with some part-time earnings. Soon he would marry Glynis and set up home at Woonona. Veronica, married in 1961, she and her husband Bob, lived in Cura Street, Wollongong, and she worked at Davis and Penny's Wholesalers. John, married Fran in 1964 and was employed in mining. Home for them was at Wilton. Paddy was working in the shunting yards at Port Kembla and soon would head off to New Zealand to work at Lake Manapuri. Colleen, was attending primary school, with younger sister Frances, at St. Columbkille's Corrimal. Mum, began working as the catering manager at Davis and Penny's Wollongong. Dad, was still at the Corrimal Coke Works and repairing shoes in the evening. Vatican II. My parents, like so many other Catholics in our parish, were overjoyed when changes brought about by Vatican II began to filter through. For starters, Mass was now celebrated in English. For nearly all of us, both parents and kids, it was the first time any of us fully understood what we had been part of all of our lives. English in an English-speaking country. Like the arrival of sliced bread, you wondered why it had taken so long. Not only that, but the priest now conducted the service facing the congregation. Revolutionary? It was almost Protestant. I clearly remember the sanctuary bells ringing at Sunday Mass. We'd all kneel in the congregation when a prayer called the Confiteor was said. Altar boys would lie prostrate across the sanctuary steps beating their chests saying, Mea culpa, mea maxima culpa. Translated, through my fault, through my most grievous fault. Such was the shackles of creedalism that found their way down through the centuries. Just another form of subjugating the thinking of the faithful, as we were so labeled. That it befell an elderly Pope, Pope John XIII, to usher in such fundamental change was more than a little surprising. Maybe that's how he saw it too. He, like the Church, was becoming irrelevant. After half a century of global chaos, destruction, and suffering, the writing was on the wall. As Bob Dylan saw it, the order was rapidly fading. The Church needed to rediscover its mojo. Time to get back to basics. Even though I was still in primary school, I remember how warmly the average person in the pews received many of the progressive changes. Nuns too could adapt or swap their heavy serge habits for lighter fabrics, remove the gamps around their faces, wear a veil with a little bit of hair protruding. Vatican II also flung open the convent doors to be part of the wider community, without too much restriction and limitation. This in particular had an immediate effect on my family. Dad's sister Kitty was a nun in the Sisters of Mercy. Her given name was Catherine. But the name she was given on taking perpetual vows was also Catherine, after Saint Catherine of Alexandria. With Vatican II, she was allowed to be Sister Catherine Ryan. Up until then, the Mother Superior of the order usually allocated a sister's or nun's name to them. Some were given awful names such as Theophilus, a nun who terrorized my younger sister Colleen. Traditionally, many of these women who entered the convent did so because of family poverty and the gaining of blessings from God to be bestowed in time upon their families. So told to them for the benefit of swelling the ranks in an order of convent nuns. It was the same for the young men of the day who entered the priesthood and religious life. Think also of women standing in front of a class of 50-plus children, even more in some school scenarios, endeavoring to teach them, while also maintaining discipline. Working in dilapidated school buildings enduring summer heat, clothed in heavy serge with a gamp around their faces. The mind boggles too, as they also dealt with midlife menopause. Then after school hours, returning to the idiosyncrasies of a community of personalities in a household of several plus women. Aunt Kitty. Aunt Kitty was Dad's sister, and her arrival was always much anticipated. She almost always visited us during the 6-week Christmas summer holidays. Mum would go out of her way to make each visit a special time for her. In the days before Vatican II, Aunt Kitty, or Kid as Dad called her, would arrive around lunchtime in the company of another nun. Nuns prior to Vatican II were not allowed to travel alone. They would also eat alone, sitting away from the family after the family had finished their meal. Something that my mother abhorred. Post-Vatican II, the change in Auntie Kitty was obvious. The black serge habit was dispensed with, and she would arrive in a white habit, with a hemline just above her lace-up shoes. A small hairline and full face, showing under a small shoulder-length veil. No black veil extending to her hips, and even more liberating, no other nun accompanying her. And for us, just as importantly, she didn't have to return to a nearby convent at night. She could join us at our meal table and enjoy family togetherness with people she loved. She seemed so more relaxed and more of the woman Dad used to tell us about after Vatican II. She now had a freedom to express herself and not just her faith. This made her so happy, because she was now free to socialize and enjoy her family's togetherness. She and Dad were always close. They loved sharing the fun times and antics they got up to as kids growing up. Some of her stories would have us in stitches. Us kids just loved the fact that she could now stay over, often sleeping in my bedroom. And I got to bunk on the couch. Now that my brothers were grown up or had moved away, I became the nephew she grew fond of. She always looked out for me when I was young and had prayed fervently at the time of my heart surgery. Robbing Peter. Money, or the lack of it, was always the raw nerve in the Ryan household. No matter how hard Dad worked or how hard my mother scrimped, there was never enough to go round. At the heart of it lay my father's blind insistence that his children all be educated in the Catholic school system. Nothing could shift him in this view. Not the tears, not the quarrels, not the deprivations. I was there through all those years, and I could never quite work it out. He would grumble about costs, taxes, his pay, and so on, but never ever anything to do with the church. My dad was like so many other family men and women born in the Catholic ways of the time. But my brother John was not one of them. And as always, he had a particular knack for redrafting the lay of the land in the sharpest and clearest of terms. It was one afternoon, when a neighbor Bernie Comerford came knocking at our door as a representative of the Catholic Church's planned giving program. Bernie just happened to be the local SP bookie, which was illegal at the time. John, who had just finished his tenure of beatings at the hands of the Christian Brothers, overheard the conversation and erupted. Pointing to the door, John landed this knockout blow. "There's the door. After what those effing bastards at Christian Brothers did to me, there will be no donations given here." Mum and Dad were speechless. John went further, storming out of the house after Bernie, "What do you donate from USP bookie revenue?" As always, John's moral compass was dead accurate. Lights out 63. Only 3 of the Ryan family would choose a Catholic partner to marry. Ironically, in time, one would be me. 2 of the men married Protestant women, one of the Anglican Church and the other, the Dutch Reformed Church. And the eldest, Joy, really put the stray cat amongst the papal pigeons, marrying in a registry office. The others all marrying spouses who converted before or after marriage. One notable exception was one of my brothers. At 17, Mark found out his girlfriend he had been dating for some time was pregnant. He discussed the situation with Dad and chose to do the right thing. Taking full responsibility, he asked her to marry him. When discussing it many years later, he said to me, "Phil, I had made my bed. I had to lie in it. But at the time, it was admirable. It proved him to be an honorable and courageous man of integrity. Not that I needed any convincing. The fact of the matter was they were both very in love. And are still to this day. Together they've enjoyed a happy marital relationship of 60+ years. However, this was the early 1960s. The church's response was for the parish priest, a Monsignor, to marry them at 6 p.m. in the evening on a Friday. Saturdays were reserved for honorable Catholic marriages. All of which meant we all missed an episode of my favorite Martian. Not to be deterred and to add insult to injury, the Monsignor informed them he would only light up the front section of the church as a mark of disgrace for the fact his wife-to-be was pregnant. The happy couple settled into a small dwelling in another Catholic parish, in an adjacent suburb, and quickly got a visit from the local priest. He welcomed them to the parish before instructing them both on their responsibility to contribute monetarily to the upkeep of the parish. My brother, struggling on apprentice wages, decided then and there to follow the lights-out edict the church set on his wedding day. Showing the priest the door, he closed it behind him and turned off the porch light. The church has never seen a penny of his since, much to the appreciation of just about every other charity. This, right up to helping on the ground, in the building of a hospital in Papua New Guinea, for the native population. Always the willing helper, both with family and the rest of the community. Now that's a brother to look up to. To this day, he has only ever darkened the church's door for other people's weddings and funerals. Family snapshot, Sister Colleen Therese. Like me, my sisters Colleen and Frances were the babies of the family, Colleen turning up in 1953 and Frances making her appearance in 1956. Mum always referred to us as the 3 little ones, which was both an affectionate term and a fairly accurate assessment of our relative size. The key detail here is that I've always been especially close to both of them. Our nearest sibling, Mark, was already off at school, dealing with important matters like marbles and lunchboxes. So it was natural, the last 3 of us formed something of an alliance. After all, we were the only ones we knew. That and the shared understanding, unique to small children, that no matter who you stood next to, the world still revolved around you. That being said, my initial response to this newfound companionship was less than gracious. When Mum and Dad brought Colleen home from the hospital, I took one look at her, grasped the situation immediately, and suggested, quite reasonably I thought, that she be returned. Mum declined. Desperate measures were now needed. So I then slammed the front gate shut so they couldn't come in. A few minutes later I was straightened out in no uncertain terms and was shown the back veranda, where I contemplated the benefits of my newfound wisdom. With that kind of encouragement, I quickly grew to love my new sister and do to this day. Like all of us, she too had her hard times at school. That being thoroughly terrified of her teacher Sister Theophilus, who doubled as an ogre. Colleen survived to become a wonderfully jovial, good-hearted girl with a great sense of fun. She married Keith Booth in 1973 and with 3 daughters in tow they moved to Queensland in the 1980s. There the family thrived. The girls went on to achieve great success in teaching and in business. but Colleen remained at the heart of the family. A wonderful mother, cook, and grandmother. The latter applied with lashings of fun and laughter.